Welcome to the EMN podcast, where philosophy meets disaster and uncomfortable truths meet the profession we call emergency management. This is not safe space thinking. This is the arena. Let's begin. Well, good morning, Daniel.
Good morning, brother. How you doing?
Look at these festive candy canes and stuff.
Yeah, we're into the Christmas season.
The Christmas season is upon us. A few things happening here, in the world. First of all, I just want to say happy Hanukkah to those that are celebrating Hanukkah. And, to those who did not see the news over the weekend, there was an attack in Australia on a Hanukkah celebration where 11 people lost their lives. And, I don't understand the hate that is out there in this world. I just wish we could figure out how to stop that from happening. But my prayers for sure, my condolences for those who lost are with all those. And we also had an attack in Brown University as well during the same time period. So it's a dangerous world right now.
It's one of those things that doesn't matter as much as I think about it and try and understand it. I can't understand the level of hate that's out there that you would want to cause people that you do not know, that have done nothing to you, harm, just because you don't agree with their faith or their culture or their belief system, So it's one of those things I'll never understand it, but it sadly is the life we live in. It's just another day. We get it so much now, but I go back to the thing in my head too that says, is it just another thing? Does it happen every day now, or do we just see it more than we used to?
Yeah, I think it's a little bit of both, actually. 20 years ago, well, maybe even more, before the internet, we wouldn't have known about the Australia attack until, days after, right? Good, bad, or indifferent. And today it's right in front of our face. I mean, I had an alert on my phone as it was breaking before it was even in the news. Through our, some of the stuff that we do as part of our job, right? So it is in our face. And then also, off the Pacific Northwest with the storms that are happening over there. I mean, we have a lot of stuff going on in the emergency management world today. And this idea of Black Swan event versus Gray Rhino, I put this up here on the board on our content calendar, if you will, back in August for this day. This was just oddly planned out that we could start talking about that in the sense of these major events that are occurring. We talk about this concept of the idea. It says a Black Swan event. Nicholas Taleb, again, like we talked about him last week, Nicholas Taleb wrote the book Black Swan, and it's referenced, for those of you who haven't read it or don't really understand what the Black Swan is. In the 1800s, in Britain, people say all swans are white, and there's no such thing as a black swan. And then when they went to Australia, they saw black swans, right? And they went, oh my gosh, this is just a mind-blowing idea of what a black swan even existed. And so the concept is it's an event that you could never think that existed, that came. And so we think of a black swan event, kind of after 9/11, as could we predict the terrorist attack on the World Trade Center with planes. Michelle Wucker, or Wucker, depends on how you pronounce it. I think it's Wucker, actually, German ways, wrote a book called The Gray Rhino, and I actually interviewed her a while back, and it's great interview with her. The Gray Rhino is things that we know could occur, right? So basically our threat assessments, earthquake bridges falling down, like mitigation on those bridges, things like this, things that we know that could possibly happen, that we may or may not really being prepared for. And do we, put our head in the sand like a ostrich, bring on all the animals that we could possibly bring in this conversation, right? Do we put our head in the sand, if we will, the proverbial sand, and just forget about it, or should we be planning for the great rhino? And the contention here that I have, and Daniel, I don't know if you agree with me or not, is I think most of the events that we are facing are gray rhino events, not black swan events. And that's my argument for today.
I don't disagree with that at all. Actually, I think in thinking about it, I agree that so there's a lot of when it comes to the gray rhino events that we ignore, and we plan for the black swans. And I think that's where there's a gap there, because there's no need to always be planning for the black swan. Should the black swan thinking be part of what we do? Yes. But I see it has become such a large part of our thinking that we're ignoring the gray rhino, the things that we know we're going to face. And I don't know that there's any way we can move forward as an industry, as a profession, as an individual doing the job, if we don't reverse that.
Let's put this in the context of COVID, right? The elected officials, not all of them, but the ones that were in front of cameras, even some of the public health people, which really was disheartening to me, were in front going, "Oh, we could have never predicted this level of pandemic." And I'm like, well, we planned for this. We had pandemic flu plans in our EOPs, emergency operations plans. Public health we had medicine set aside, at one point, with the in our caches, for these type of events. We practiced, quote unquote, air quotes, if you will, with MERS and SARS, H1N1 flu outbreak that we had just a few years ago, prior to the pandemic. For people to say that this was something that was out of the ordinary, it was a black swan event. I think for them it was a black swan event because they did not read the memos that we wrote. They did not read. They didn't look at the EOPs, emergency operations plans. They didn't go through what the warnings that public health had. They didn't equate the stuff that we had beforehand to a pandemic. This should not have shocked anybody that one of these respiratory illnesses were coming. I want to add one more point to this. The October interview I had with Army's version of the CDC. I forget the guy's name now. I've interviewed so many people. The officer who I interviewed is a colonel. Yeah, with the Army's. Anyway, I asked him what kept them up at night, type question, and he basically said a respiratory illness coming out of China. And I was blowing my mind to this day that a month later, this is the month later we SARS broke in November, right? So it was on their radar. This was not a black swan event. That's a gray rhino. That's what we're talking about. That's what I'm talking about. I think 9/11 you could potentially say was more of a gray rhino than a black swan. I don't think these events.
It all depends on how you look at it, and then hindsight is always 20/20. Because if you look at 9/11, there were a lot of warning signs, there was a lot of intel, there was a lot of red flags that were either ignored or miscommunicated or not communicated at all. So there was a lot of events that took place that could have definitely alerted us to these events. The events, like when you think about a black swan versus a gray rhino, I mean, you were thinking about, so like when it comes to the black swan, it's defined as an extremely rare event. The gray rhino is defined as a highly probable event.
Hmm.
So we have these definitions for these events. Now, terrorism is a highly probable event. Where they decide to attack, how they decide to attack, all this stuff, we don't necessarily know that, but we know it's a highly probable event. An extremely rare event, like a worldwide pandemic, yeah, it's a black swan event. It's a rare event. But is it impossible? No. Where there's history there, as you mentioned, and when you boil it back down, you say these leaders were getting up and they were saying, well, it was unprecedented. And I said this all the time. It was definitely not unprecedented. There was nothing unprecedented about it. But were they aware of it? So that boils back down to, we do all the work as emergency managers. We write the plans, we do the training, we're supposed to orchestrate tabletops. We're supposed to get this information out there. Did we not do our job?
Hmm.
We did the plans. We wrote the plan. Well, does everybody else know it was in the plan? How many times do we have to say that as an emergency manager trying to get the word out there and say that the importance of marketing and advertising what it is that we do? Does everybody else know what we know? Do they know what we do, how we do it, why we do it, the things that we do every day? No. And then you look at what's happening right now with FEMA reform and how that's going to affect. Now, I'm writing a paper right now on this, on how the FEMA reform can be implicated into the gray rhino and black swan line of thinking. Because the black swan and the gray rhino are these things that we're supposed to be thinking about, but we've always thought, well, FEMA will come. The big thing happens, FEMA's going to come.
Mm-hmm.
Well, what if FEMA's not coming now? FEMA reform is here. We don't know what's going to happen. So are you thinking gray rhino and black swan in a way that says, what are we going to do when FEMA's not coming? Have you thought about when this thing happens, that happens all the time, like these hurricanes and these storms that happen, and you can't rely on FEMA? Now, FEMA was never there, designed there to be there to make you whole again. Well, now we're in situations where they may not even be there to partially help you anymore. So how do we wrap our thinking around that? Because now it's not just a gray rhino and a black swan that we're trying to prepare for these events. It's how do we respond to these events when we don't have the help that we normally would have had in years past coming. FEMA, i.e. FEMA. So think about that.
I mean, let's think about that. The Pacific Northwest storms, and they're going to get whacked again. So, everybody up there, prepare yourselves for this. Has been declared a national disaster, right? The president declared it. They're sending, they being not FEMA, but California has sent teams up there. I'm sure other states have as well. It's just I only saw the one from California. That's now being supported and paid for by the federal government. So I guess, for lack of a better term, are we seeing, even with reform, are we going to see a major shift in how response works? I don't think we're going to see a major shift in how response works. This is my prediction. I'm talking out of turn a little bit here, my friend. Because I think
that's not unusual for you.
But however, I think where we're going to see the biggest shift is how recovery works.
No, I agree with that. I think definitely recovery. I think, I think you're right when it comes to the response things, because we got that dialed in so well. And we do have, here's where I think it's gonna hit wrong, is like, we can respond well, and technically, because we've done it for so long, and that's the thing that we concentrate so much on, we can respond very well. It's going to be the decision maker saying, do we respond when we don't know who's going to foot the bill? When we don't know who's going to pay for it, that's when decisions get made that, can impact the recovery aspects of things. Because we can say, yeah, we got resources. Who's going to pay for them? Before, and still as of right now, they say, well, we're going to declare a national emergency, so everything's paid for by the government, or at least 75%, up to 75%. Yeah. So you got 75% being paid for or potentially reimbursed by the federal government. Well, if that changes, and there's like, well, we're not paying for this stuff anymore, it's going to come from the state. And the state says, well, we're not paying for it. If we're sending people up to Oregon, how are you guys going to pay for it? And Oregon's like, well, we don't know how we're going to pay for it. Well, then it's like, we can't send resources because you can't pay for them. That's the things that comes down the line, right?
Yeah.
How that affects us right now, we're still operating as if we have this type of funding, because we do. But we don't know what's coming next month and the following month, and what this administration does can be overturned by the next administration. I think it's ridiculous that they can do this so much change so frequently. But bottom line is, we don't know what's coming, and we don't know how it's going to affect us. So how are we utilizing that knowledge now, with understanding the black swans and the gray rhinos? And where should our attention be? Our attention should absolutely be on the gray rhinos. We know they're coming. We don't know how bad they're going to be, and we don't know where they're going to be. But we know they're going to come, because they come all the time. And then we continue to do the gray rhino, the black swan thinking for the rare events. But it's not what's right in front of us. We need to concentrate what's in front of us, what we can see. Because we can, like you said, we can respond very well. It's what we do. But we don't know what that potential next event could be.
Yeah, absolutely.
But, the gray rhinos out there, we know they come all the time. So you can't say, like, and I did an article on this one too, and I need to put it out. But it's on basically understanding the working in certainty and understanding the uncertainty of certainty. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
We know for certain there's going to be another hurricane. There's going to be another major storm. There's going to be, an earthquake. We know for certain that's going to happen. We are working in uncertainty on when that might happen, how bad that might happen, and how many people may be affected when that happens. That's the uncertain part of it. But we know for certain it's going to happen. We just don't know when. So we work in the uncertainty aspects of things, but knowing for certain things are going to happen. And that's the gray rhino thinking. We know it's going to happen. When it does, we might not know how bad it's going to be.
Right.
And that's how we have to think about this stuff.
Hold that thought for 1 second. First of all, Nicole says that, this whole thing's going to hurt state programs, and it's going to hurt state programs for states that don't have money.
And are completely dependent on FEMA or on the government in general, the federal government.
Right.
Yeah, I think they're definitely going to be affected at some level.
All right. Let's take a quick break, and when we come back, let's continue that conversation.
That reminds me of the hurricane last year.
Oh, I remember that. We were up for 3 days straight.
You've seen the chaos. You've made the calls. You've held the line. Now, it's time to share the story. Operational Tales is live, and EMN wants your real-life moments. The hard-won lessons, the inside jokes that saved the ship, the quiet wins that made all the difference. Write it raw. Keep it safe. Make it count. Because your story can teach, lift, and lead. Submit now on the Emergency Management Network Substack and let your voice carry farther than the radio ever could.
You got stories to share, don't you, Daniel?
I got plenty of stories. No one wants to hear them. Nobody wants to hear. I'll tell you one thing, though, and I'm enjoying today, is we got some comments coming in. People are watching, so it's great. Thank you for that, by the way, those who are watching out there. We got a lot going on in the comments section, and it's pretty amazing.
Yeah, Jenny says that the public will see cognitive dissonance reasoning and it won't happen here. It's true. It won't happen here. It won't be that bad, and I'll do it later. And we hear this all the time, especially we'll talk about the fires, right? I mean, the LA fires of 2025 We're coming up to the 1 year anniversary of that, by the way. No one, I say no one. The prediction of having that large of a fire in the off season in January in the winter, it normally doesn't happen, right? I mean, like this is like when the wildland firefighter guys are doing some training and are doing other things, and then boom, it's one of the largest fires, the most expensive fire for sure. Two realistically, fires: the Eden fire and the Palisades fire, hit, and during a windstorm. Was that a gray rhino, or was that a black swan?
That was a gray rhino. That was absolutely a gray rhino. Those fires. We know fires happen. Doesn't matter if there's an off season or an on season. I don't think there is an on season or off season for when it comes to fire. We see it more in certain temperatures than we do others, but it was definitely a gray rhino, especially in California. For it to be as big as it was, highlighted failure and miscommunication and bad planning. That in itself, all coming together at one time, could be seen as a black swan, but it was a gray rhino event.
I'll tell you this much: I was on a panel on Friday that will be released. I think it's going to be released on the 17th. Is what Kyle told us. Ralph Bloomer's, if you guys, Elemental is the name of the movie that he produced. A great movie. Go check it out. And good conversation. Now, he got the warning because they're down here actually filming this thing on the Santa Monica, not Santa Monica, I guess Santa Monica, but the Malibu Brigade. It's a volunteer organization that LA County Fire created. We can get deeper into that conversation in a bit, but he was doing a documentary on them. Got a phone call saying, hey, from the weather guy saying, hey, look, you got this huge weather event coming your way. Have your film crews ready because you're probably going to catch some fires. So even the media knew that this is, I mean, not saying the fire guys weren't prepared. That's not where my argument's going. But the media knew this was going to be a big event. Fire knew this was going to be a big event. They were pre-staging things. So as far as winds go, who didn't get it were the people. And this goes back to what Jenny's saying, that it won't happen here. It won't be that bad. When evacuation orders come out, people go, oh, do I really have to go? I've lived through X amount of hurricanes. I've lived through X amount of fires. We haven't had this problem. And then Jenny again says, do you think these mindsets have a play in the EM realm? Let's tackle that question real quick here. And then I want to go into some of the stuff that Nicole's actually kind of posted as well. But do you think these mindsets have a play in the EM realm?
I personally think they play way too heavily in the EM realm. There are EMs out there that work in emergency management that, even though they work in the world of EM and they know the things that can happen, still have the mindset that, well, that's probably not going to happen here, or it's not going to be that bad, or this is something I can work with later. And it is affecting the way that they prepare for and plan for these events in their communities. But it also affects deeply the way people see in those communities, and that leadership interprets things. And to go back to, the question of the cognitive dissonance, when you think about, when we think we don't deal in absolutes. We're not supposed to deal in absolutes in emergency management, for sure. Never and always. Those should not
bad words
play. They're very bad words in the EM industry.
Take them out of your vocabulary.
But when we are not, and we know, like if we're thinking that I am guilty of this when it came to COVID. I had people ask me flat out, you think we're going to shut down? No, we're not going to shut down. I was flat out, when they shut us down, I was like, what? Like I was completely taken, because I was like, no way no way. It happened. How we represent our office, our duties, our responsibilities, how we talk to the public, how we talk to our leadership, if they get a hint that we are not feeling urgency, there's no urgency in what we're doing, they're going to feed off of that. And if we are not telling them how bad things are, how bad they can be, if we're not putting that message out there on a consistent basis, especially when the bad thing is going to happen, and we're not trying every part of our communication strategy isn't to get that message out there, we're failing. And there are people out there who say, when you say these hurricanes are coming in, these storms are coming in, well, yeah, I've lived through them. They've never been that bad. Well, we can go all the way back to Katrina to make this argument. It wasn't the storm.
Right.
It was the levees failing that killed people.
Right. And
it's unprecedented. That's a freaking black swan. The gray rhino that came in preceded the black swan. And we have to tell that messaging. That message needs to be consistent out there to say, this isn't going to be like every other year. This isn't going to be like the ones you got away with. This next one is going to be so bad, you may not get away with it. Write your social security number on your arm so we can identify your body. This is the kind of information and the urgency we should be sharing with our communities.
I want to build on that, on the Katrina one, because I remember after the storm came in, there were newscasters in the middle of the streets in Bourbon Street saying, "Oh, New Orleans dodged a bullet," because New Orleans didn't get damaged that bad. And then boom, like it was that day that the levee started.
Yeah, and they started happening, and these were things that they were like, "Where's this? What's happening?" And when they finally did, it was too late.
Brian Colburn, our one of our partners here at EMN, he's the one that writes the Daily Brief. He actually responded to Katrina. He was down there and he was telling me a bunch of different stories about that. But that's a thing for another day.
I responded in the recovery aspect. I wasn't there, but I saw the damage. And I saw how bad it was. And yeah, I mean, you don't. That's not what when we say, okay, that was a black rhino or a gray rhino, followed by a black swan.
Black swan. That could be
in the same event.
I guess that could be called a black rhino then, huh?
Yeah. Well, yeah, you can combine them that way because you just don't. I mean, we don't know. We just don't know. And how when it came to that, I mean, yeah, the storm was really bad, but the fact that the levees broke was that was the devastation.
I want to. Nicholas wrote, while I do think the FEMA needs to be restructured to be more efficient, I don't think there's an emergency manager worth their salt that wouldn't argue that. I don't agree with how the administration is doing it. I don't think there's an emergency manager.
I 100% agree with that too.
That either. Recognize and update mission objectives and responsibility to be an executive cabinet position. And Nicholas, from your mouth to the president's ears, I guess. But I fear that'll be happening destabilization of the organization. Yeah, you know what? And that I think in a sense, this whole FEMA thing for us, was this a black swan event? I mean, did we see an administration coming in and just ripping FEMA apart like the way it is?
To this extent, I mean, this president in particular, I mean, he's extreme in everything that he does. So, I mean, but would we be able to predict that he would go after an organization such as FEMA in this way? I don't think so. Was it needed? Absolutely. It's definitely needed. And it came from, this all stems from back going to the fires of 2025 when he was,
hurricane hit North Carolina.
Yeah. So all this is, that too. But you see that and he's like, yeah, there's definitely needs to be changed, but the extremity of it is so extreme that now it's affecting the whole United States organizations of emergency management. Now we have to think, because it goes down to every level. We got to think, okay, the state, they're trying to put all this on the state, and in the state, the counties and the cities, or the counties receive from the state, and then the cities receive from the county, and then it's there's a whole lot. It was a chain event, but this chain event is so uncertain at the moment that we don't know how it's going to be. But what we do know is that it's a perfect opportunity for us to say, we got to start planning for this. We got to start planning for not having this funding available. We got to start planning for these positions not being funded. We got to start planning. So are they waiting or are they planning? Those people that are in those positions right now. As an emergency manager in that position, am I waiting for, or am I planning and am I telling those people that are in leadership and strategic places what we should be looking at and how we should be planning for funding, for positions, for whatever? Or are we waiting to see what happens?
Yeah, that's
That'll tell you what kind of emergency manager you are right there.
I'll tell you what I think. This is the most important thing for me right now. Is capacity building, right?
This is the way.
This is the way. I had to bring this up because
I'm
a Star Wars fan, and that was just amazing.
This is the way.
Right.
I have spoken. That needs to be like what we interpret. This is the way, and I have spoken. That needs to be an emergency manager's go-to. This is what needs to be done. I have spoken.
I just sneezed. Sorry about that. So Nick says, I've never really understand the juxtaposition of the Black Swan event in EM, where the EOC activation is seen as a Black Swan every event by its citizenry. That's a good point, Nick. This is kind of like, it's kind of my the reason why I brought this up is as we're doing the Black Swan versus Gray Rhino. And you're right. I think one of the problems that we have, and this kind of goes back up to what Ginny was saying with the idea that people say it's not going to happen here, it's not going to happen to me. I think that puts you into that mindset that whatever happens, that fire is a Black Swan event. I mean, I live in the WUI.
That's the thing.
Let me make
I'm sorry. In my head, some people do this when they got to talk.
Okay, I live in the WUI, and my hill side where I live hasn't burned in like, I don't know. Something says my neighbor said it hasn't burned like in 40 years. Doesn't mean that it won't burn. Matter of fact, it means that there's a ton of fuel up there, right? So every day I'm going, when is the day that the fire is going to start? And it's a weird way to live, but the other people in my neighborhood are going to think, oh my God, this will never burn. It will never burn. And that's going to be a Black Swan event. I think maybe it is a mindset, Nick.
It's a line of thinking. It's a way that it's thinking, because it's like we get skipped, right? So you think this thing could happen. It could absolutely happen, but it didn't happen here. So it didn't happen here this year. It didn't happen here last year. It didn't happen the year before that. What's the chance it's going to happen here next year? That's the line of thinking that gets us in trouble, because we start seeing fires and stuff like that, and they happen in the same areas, in the big forest and the isolated areas, and you're like, wait a minute, well, what about Paradise? But it was in the mountains. Oh, it was not on a hillside. It doesn't matter where. We get in our head, it's only going to happen around those areas.
Right.
It's never going to happen right behind my house, in those hills, in that forest.
Right. I think
that's where we start the line of thinking goes. We see a Gray Rhino. We see it. It happens every year. But the Black Swan.
The other problem with fires, though, the other problem with fires as well, though, is that if you are a mile outside of where the fire's at, it's clear as day. You can still stop at the 7-Eleven and get yourself a cup of coffee, and you look at that big header over there and go, oh, that's terrible. I got to go to work. And you're able to disconnect yourself from those big events. When we have the hurricanes, again, when you're out here on the West Coast watching, Texas or Louisiana or the Southeast getting palmed by a hurricane, you're going, oh, that's terrible. Or the tornadoes that rip through Joplin or whatever. We have that ability to disconnect ourselves from happening. It doesn't happen here. It only happens there. Thank God I don't live there. Kind of attitude, but we forget that everywhere we live, there's a threat. Whether it's man-made. I mean, man-made, or if it's like in Bondi, just this weekend, or if it's natural. Nicole asks, "How do you feel about not wasting the good crisis?" Nicole,
I love that.
Yeah,
I love it. I actually 100% agree. We should not waste a good crisis. We don't want to take advantage of it by any means in a negative way. But we want to utilize that crisis to strengthen our message on what it is that we do. A lot of people, especially in our own organizations, don't understand what we do, why we do it, why it's important, how it affects them, which is a big important one. That's how you get people involved. How does it affect them? Utilizing something that's happening, a crisis that's happening, or a situation that's happening that could absolutely affect you in some way, and be realistic to what happens in your jurisdiction or your area or organization. We should absolutely utilize that, because it's going to be all over the place. Yeah. It's going to be in the news. It's going to be, and you can absolutely reach out to your organization and say, in the light of events, I'd like to bring your attention to our EOP in this section that says this thing, or we're going to be doing training on this thing. And yeah, absolutely utilize that, because it's in their mind. It's what they see, and they're going to be thinking, I wonder what we got, what we're doing, or how we're doing. Show them, take advantage of it, because their interest is there at that point in time. It's kind of hard to get people's interest in something that's not happening, that they can't see. And with social media, the way it is, and interest media even more, when people are watching that stuff and seeing that stuff over and over and over again, because that's what they're looking at, it's the perfect time for us to say, engage in the discussion, in the exercise, and the training. And as long as it's done in a way that's completely beneficial, and it's not taking advantage of, in a negative light, then absolutely utilize it.
Absolutely. I feel the same way. Like every time that we see, an earthquake somewhere, we should be talking about earthquake preparedness. But
oh yeah, absolutely. Especially when you see how bad it is over there, and building standards and all this other stuff.
Right. It
should absolutely be something that we bring to the forefront and telling people what we're doing.
So Nick brings up this. Nick, what if you're just okay with technology? Is that okay? From his perspective, a Black Swan event in EM is finding an EM who's great with tech. Yeah,
I mean, well, it really does depend on the EM nowadays, especially nowadays. But a lot of what's happening we still dealing with the Great Resignation and the Great Retirement and all that other stuff that's happening. So a lot of those limitations, I will say, will be exiting the field. For the most part, the majority of those that are still got 20 plus years to work have a working understanding of technology, or they should. I have a very strong personal interest vested in technology, because I want to stay on top of things, especially with AI. A lot of people are letting this opportunity kind of just pass them by, when they could be utilizing it for training, for other technology out there that can help them do their jobs better. But some people are just afraid of it. They're afraid. They don't want to start something they don't understand. But Nick he's been in technology for a long time. He knows a lot of this stuff. Plus, he's more of a future thinker in his own right. So he's ahead of the game.
He's ahead of the game. That's why I love talking to him about it. But all right, guys. Hey, look, you know what? We're like almost 8 minutes over. We are 8 minutes over time. And it sounds like my next meeting is coming through the speakers here. So I got to get going. We got to get going. This conversation can go on forever. Thank you for participating in the chat. That made this even better. And until next time, hope everybody stays safe, and hope you guys are having a great holiday season. Happy Hanukkah to all those who celebrate Hanukkah. I think today's day 2 of Hanukkah. If anybody wants to drop off a Hanukkah gift to me, I'm more than happy to take one. And I will see you. Wait, because one last thing to say. He goes, folks going to equate AI with tech. Not really. This is true. And we'll leave Nick on that one. You get the last word on that. Daniel, until next time, everybody, please stay hydrated and stay.
When the sirens scream out loud, we're the voice that breaks the cloud. Heads out high when things go wrong. We'll guide you through with strength and song. Disaster strikes without a sound. Chaos reigns, but we're around. Public safety in our hands. Steady, strong in every land. Emergency.